So I think you guys can all see my screen. I'll bring you all to me. Let me just do this. And then I'll start with the presentation.
One quick second, Mauricio. I forgot for the people that are here. We're with a big group, 83 people. Thanks for being here. If you have a question, we have on the bottom side of the Miro board, you can leave questions. So we will have time for questions at the end. Please, because we have such a big group, we cannot do them during the workshop, but please keep them for the end because we have saved some time for the Q&A. So at the bottom of the screen, you can leave your questions. Bottom of the Miro board.
Yes, please do. And then at the end, we're going to have some dedicated time to go over the questions. Yes. So without further ado, why do we teach? Why is it important to learn about data storytelling? I like to tell people, I'm an analyst at heart, that in the end of the day, doing analytical work is just part of analytical work. Really, the key thing is making decisions, being better, and we make change in the organization, and that change comes from our audience, people understanding the output of our analysis. So the key thing is that we need data storytelling so we can present this analysis in a way that people can understand what we have to say, what are the insights, why is it that we should go A and not B, that they remember what we have said, right? That is not just numbers going about that they completely forget. And the most important bit is that they care about it enough that they act upon those insights. Otherwise, it's just, smoke and mirrors, nothing gets done. So the agenda for today, we started with Yair with intro, an icebreaker. I'll do a little bit of my intro in a bit. We're going to do that for about 5 more minutes. Then I'm going to go into the topic of store ideation. We're going to spend 20 minutes doing a little bit of that together. Then we're going to structure the story later on for about 20 more minutes. And then finally, I'll have a little bit of an exercise where we together are going to identify and analyze different types of formats that we can use to tell data stories, to tell, analytical insights. And then you guys can, decide a little bit better for yourselves what actually works. And then in the end, we're going to have the Q&A. So Yair kind of already hinted at who we are, what we do as Growth Tribe. We're a digital learning partner. We specialize in some pillars, but our focus really are on the skills of the future, things that are very high on demand. So data science, growth hacking, digital marketing, innovation, leadership, and customer experience, user experience. So here you can see some of the companies that we have had alumni with, including Miro, of course. And just before I move on, perhaps a little bit about me. I actually have a little bit of a diverse background. I am a data analyst by background, but I also studied music and film production. So I kind of touched quite a lot on script writing and storytelling writing, which is one of my passions. So we're trying to combine some of those techniques that we use in fiction, that we use in entertainment, in order to apply to business and make things a little bit more interesting for our stakeholders. So why is this such an important bit, such an important topic? It was very well laid out by the Harvard Business Review when they discussed the last mile problem. And it can be summarized as the last mile problem as the presentation of data science to lay audiences hasn't evolved as rapidly or as fully as the technical part, which pretty much means we got super good in doing analysis, in doing modeling, in doing machine learning, in doing all of that. But when it comes to actually show and share all of those things, we haven't been trained actually to do that. Which is something that, designers and, communicators would do very, very well. It's now part of our scope. And then we got lost, and then we lose our audience while we try to communicate, right? And that's a big problem. That's where a lot of analytical projects actually go to die, which is actually quite sad. So we want to move in a way that we can actually make, the analysis actually happen and be useful. So we need to consider these 3 different elements. We need to consider data. Of course, data is the foundation. If you don't start with data, you're just doing something else. You're not doing data storytelling. You might be doing fiction writing or just telling stories or, your opinion or something. but that's not data storytelling. Then that's something else. So we need to start with the data, of course, as the foundation. Then the visual aspect is actually quite, you know, sophisticated and mature already. You know, there are a lot of courses out there that teach about how to build better charts, how to make them, you know, less cluttered and highlight the key points of information, or how to match the like specific types of charts to specific type of data that you are analyzing. And that's like great. That helps a lot because, you know, it helps us understand and make sense of a lot of data. We cannot go through every single cell on spreadsheets, right? We have a lot of data. So, you know, definitely helps. However, there is one catch usually that people fall prey to, which is just throwing everything at an audience at once, right? You do your analysis, perhaps you're there on like Google Analytics, you know, grabbing a lot of screenshots of your charts and trends. Perhaps you were doing your, you know, your analysis on acquisition models, et cetera, et cetera. You just throw it all at the audience and they get completely overwhelmed. They cannot, you know, retain anything. So that's why we need data stories. We need a way to tell all of that in a way that raises the engagement and also the relatability of what we have to say. So with those three elements combined, that's when we have a lot of power. I want to bring this as an example. Oh, it's a little bit broken here. I'm just going to move this a little bit to the right. But this is a very good example, an example that I like quite a lot. It's from Nadia Bremer, and she has created this "Why Do Cats and Dogs" website. I'm actually going to go there just like very quickly, just to show what this is about. It's a great example of data storytelling. So she wanted to figure out how, you know, cats and dogs actually behave and what are the key questions people ask about pets behavior, especially, you know, these two types of pets, especially because she herself has had cats and dogs for quite a while, since she was like 14 years old. So, you know, we can relate straight away because it's her personal story and she wanted to understand. And of course, there's a lot of data in this. But the interesting thing, you can come here, of course, later on and explore, okay? But the interesting thing is that she already points out what are the highlights. She explains in a very personal way why she cares about this, what kind of behaviors she has observed herself from her pets, and realizing that, you know, it's actually very common. Some questions are very common, like why dogs lick this or lick that or lick that other thing, or the classical one, why do cats like boxes so much? Why do they get into boxes and stay there? So these are some of the insights, right, that are derived from data, etc., that she has communicated over here in a very kind of clear way. So you can use that as an inspiration, as an example later on. So without further ado, I want to start with story ideation. I want to go through some of the techniques, some things that you can use yourself in order to build stories, right? That will, you know, make them better when it comes to presenting insights and analytical work. So the first and probably one of the most important bits that you should learn from today is that you have to start with the what of your project. A lot of people think about what Simon Sinek says. You have to start with the why. The why is great for telling the story, definitely, not so much for creating the story. What I mean by that is that you need to understand very clearly yourself what has actually happened. Yeah? What are the key insights? What is the output? What is happening over there? So like, forget just for a minute, why does that add value to your company or something like this? Just focus on the process itself. So if you think, oh, we did this particular regression on this particular metrics, and we realized that these factors are correlated with people churning from our platform. That is the what. We are not thinking about the overall value. We're just thinking about really what has happened. So the very first point for you is this. Before you start telling the story, know what is the key element, what has been accomplished. The opposite of that is sometimes when you hear from kids, right? They are trying to tell you a story. They don't even know where the story goes. They just start, oh, I was doing that. And then that other thing happened. And it was like, okay, what's the point? Like, where are you heading? You don't even know what is the end game here. So we need to have that clear, okay, from the get-go. So I want you guys to jump into the frame with me. you know, just grab some post-its, add some post-its over there, and perhaps you can tell us some of analytical projects you have done, you know, from building dashboards to reporting on certain metrics to doing some analysis or modeling on some particular coefficients or metrics or something like this. That will be very, very helpful. Of course, you don't need to go super into detail. You can keep it very broad, but I just want to use this as a little bit of an inspiration. So perhaps let's give like 2-3 minutes for you guys to do this. Perhaps I'll add a timer over here. So let's just add a timer. So I think 2 minutes should be enough.
You can join us by clicking on the board link in the chat. And if you need a new sticky, just press N on your keyboard if the stickies are gone.
Voice of employee trust, risk indexes, KPIs formed by many inputs. Love that kind of work. Yeah, it's super cool. Creating metrics. Analysis of startups in the startup program. That's probably from Yair. Yes. Nice. Reporting on prototype testing. I have a few more on analyzing customer journey. I see a few that are very close to my heart, like, you know, analyzing students' opinion and sentiment analysis of qualitative learner feedback on virtual workshops. These are some of the stuff that we like doing here as well. That's super valuable. Nice. So I think we got enough, and this is already your starting point. Okay. Anytime you think about, okay, I need to step into a presentation, I need to create a presentation for certain stakeholders, for some people in my organization, you start with this. You start with this one, you know, post-its like, what is it that we actually have done over here, right? And you narrow it down to that. Okay. So the next step is that you enhance this a little bit. We really very much like this kind of, I would say, this executive summary, I would call it, or, you know, like a short summary TLDR that you can expand a little bit based on the what. So we actually have two examples that I can share with you. The first one being from FAMOF, here from the Netherlands. For instance, they were at a time that they were getting a lot of inbound customers. They were growing their customer base quite a lot, and they were having trouble with managing all the data, right? It's just too much data coming in all at once. So basically you can, you know, summarize it like this: to gain speed of operations as well as data consistency, their data team initiated the creation of a data warehouse where they would structure, put all the data together. And now the decision makers in the marketing team can consume these key analytics metrics in streamlined dashboards, right? So this is an example of a data project, which pretty much could be summarized as build a marketing data warehouse, right? And then you expand it a little bit. The other example could be from Aviva, a big insurer from the UK. And what they have done is creating this algorithmic decision agent, which is basically a recommendation system. So they would do that in order to recommend the most suitable products to their customers. So their data team built a supervised machine learning model that predicts customers' propensities to buy new insurance products Now the marketing and product teams can display personalized advertising. Very common and mature use case of machine learning in pretty much any industry right now, right? So this is part of the canvas you guys can use later on to, to just expand on the what. You build these 2 paragraphs, right? The first usually is more focused on the what, and then the next one can be a little bit more business-like, where you add a little bit on the, let's say, the value created, the added value of your project. This is one example that actually happened here at Growth Tribe. So because, of course, we have a lot of courses, we have a lot of students and participants, one of the most important metrics for us is Net Promoter Score. We want to see how much people are enjoying and recommending our courses. So we needed to do this manually every single time we had a new cohort. So that was a lot of manual, repetitive work. We needed to do a little bit better. So to enable more efficient and reliable reporting on customer feedback, the data team at Growth Tribe, created a Net Promoter Score dashboard to be used internally. And now the product owners, pretty much any stakeholder involved with that, can easily verify which of the modules that we have are underperforming, what customers like about the courses, and what can be improved in order to run new experiments, in order to, improve on the product. Okay, so utilize this as kind of your elevator pitch, or like your one-pager of what your project is about. With that, I want to bring you to the area, or to the step where we start to storyfy the project, right? So far, it's very descriptive. It's like, this is what happened, this was our project, and this is how it adds value. Like, great, but we want to start adding these elements that make things more interesting. And the way you can also start from, the core is to think about the premise of your story. So the premise is that what, but storyfied. The best way, and one of the best ways I've heard about this, is this from Douglas Dugan, and he says that a premise is always in this format. Somebody wants something badly and has a hard time getting it. Yeah. So think about, I'll give you guys some seconds to think about movies that you have recently watched, perhaps series, perhaps books, fiction you've read, and think about, can you see any that do not conform to this? Think about it a little bit. It's hard, isn't it? It's very, very hard, because most stories do follow this particular idea. We need somebody, a character, someone that we would care about, right? And that character wants something. They have a certain goal, right? So something that they want to accomplish. So we are rooting for them to achieve something. In a rom-com would be for the to the two love interests to get together. In my favorite movie of all time, in Lord of the Rings, they want to destroy the One Ring so they can, save the world from Sauron. But along the way, you have obstacles, you have challenges, you have blockers. Because if the story doesn't have that, it's boring. It's freaking boring. Nobody wants to hear it. If a movie is just like, oh yeah, these two lovebirds met and they got together and everything worked from the beginning, they never fought, and their life was amazing, it's like, yeah, that lasted like 10 seconds of a description. I will never see 2 hours of that, because that is boring. Same for any action movie, same for any fiction. So think on this, all right, and then start thinking, okay, how do we apply this on a data context or on analytical projects, right? So the premise, in the end of the day, that's what it does. It combines these 3 elements: the character, the insight or the goal or the objective, and finally, the obstacle. You can think of these as elements, kind of like ingredients that you lay out on your countertop before you cook your story, right? So you can brainstorm a little bit on them. You don't need to be super critical in the beginning. Okay, that's where a lot of people get wrong as well. They go into it's like, oh yeah, my character needs to be perfect, and I need to. Guys, a lot of you come from a startup world, so I know that you are all like you know, big promoters of the fail fast kind of methodology. Is the same here. Like brainstorm, add things, later on you can kind of filter it down, you can kind of trim it down for what works. Okay, I want to tell you a little bit why these matter. So the first one being about character. I was talking to my buddy, my peer Juan. He's also like an amazing educator on data storytelling. He's a writer himself, and he did a lot of research. And what a lot of scientists have kind of, you know, agreed on is that there are two hormones that really are activated when we talk about or when we listen to stories. One of them being cortisol, which is the struggle hormone. It increases stress, right? When you get a little bit stressed in a good way, it's that sensation of being on the edge of your seat, you know, when you're watching a movie. It's when, you know, the situation is hype and it's tense and you don't know what's going to happen. So that kind of creates that stress that activates your brain and your perception to like, pay attention to this. This is important. This is a moment that is very intense and you need to be present. So in the same way for stories, if we don't add those spikes, people just, you know, they doze off, they get bored, they start sleeping, they don't care anymore. They'll pick their phones and, you know, start looking at something else. So remember this, if there's no struggle, there's no story. Period. You're just describing something, then that is something else. Journalism, I guess, would be another way to describe, but it's not storytelling. It really isn't. Don't be afraid to bring up challenges, obstacles, problems you have. Just go for it. Struggles, conflict, just go for it. You don't need to be a yes person all the time. You just, you know, you can do it in a way that is just not whiny. It's just part of enhancing the story. So that's the one hormone. The second one is oxytocin, which is the caring hormone. And for us to care, right, we need to relate. And the best way to relate is, you know, to have someone to relate to. And that's when we need a character. So if you don't have a character yourself, it makes things very, very abstract. And then people don't really feel it, you know, because it's abstract, it's theoretical. Another way that characters are very important is that they can be the lens through which you tell the story. So for instance, when you're, if you think about films and so on, usually films can be told from different perspectives. Perhaps a film is told from the main character's perspective. And you can even hear on the voiceover, you know, their character's thoughts and so on. So you relate very, very quickly because it's kind of like, you know, you're driving along, you're sharing the ride with the main character, right? Or it can be told from multiple perspectives as well. It can shift perspectives, but there's always someone there for you to care about. Otherwise, you know, again, you kind of lose that relatability. So think about characters. And in here, you would be, you know, you would do very, very well if you are specific. Okay, so if you guys are talking about, let's say, a feature or something that you're launching, let's say you're launching a new product or you're launching a new feature for your product, sometimes just saying our customer base or our users become too, you know, too vague and too broad and doesn't really, you know, create that engagement that you're hoping for. So better it is perhaps you create a persona that you can use. You create a scenario, a hypothetical. What I like to do in classes myself is I call out people. So I might say, yeah, you're walking, you know, down the road, and then you see this, you see that. You make people relate like this because they're like, okay, I get it. I get it now. So in the same for your product, guys, could be your end user. Just don't say end user. Talk about that, you know, a particular person or a specific person or a persona that's going through, you know, something that relates to your story, and then you can use it as a character. The character could be you, could be your team, could be your organization. There are different approaches you can take to it, but also very important. So I want you guys to brainstorm now these three things: the characters, the insights, and the obstacles. They don't need to make sense with one another. I just want to see what kind of characters show up in analytical work. Again, what kind of insights perhaps you could uncover, or kind of like objectives you could have on analytical work. So this is for characters. Next frame is for insights. And finally, one for obstacles. And for this one, we are spoiled. There's just so many things that can go wrong with data projects. Really, it's easy peasy to fill this up. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes for this one. Okay. And then you can fill out from these three. So just here, 5 minutes. And you can get started. All right, I think we got quite a lot of characters, insights, and obstacles. So let me go back to first one, 2 characters. I love that you guys added a lot here. Of course, stakeholders, right? Every possible stakeholder is a potential character for you. You have your end users, your customers, your clients, for sure. You have investors. You have, your founders. You might have, people from the outside of the organization, but also inside the organization, right? Employee, managers, executives, and so on. So you think a lot about them. You can start with a broader view. I like that someone added here, more specific information, already thinking of a persona, already thinking about, specific names and so on. Really, really helps. And sometimes it's good to zoom out too. If it's, about the projects about your organization in the market, let's say, perhaps, the character is your organization, right? And then the other characters might be, the competitors and the regulators and so on and so forth. So that also works. So very, very, very nice here. Then there's just so many insights, right? This was more an exercise for you, because really the list is endless. It depends on the data you have. It depends on type of analysis you can make. But of course, usually it relates to your processes, it relates to your products, and it relates to your users or consumers, right? In some way, shape, or form. So I like here that some people added already, okay, this could be the results of my analysis. This is what we could uncover, right? That perhaps the customers do not want to purchase the product after the free demo. So we need to figure out what is happening here, or like, how can we remedy this? And finally, the potential obstacles you guys put over here. Very nice. I like that you added a lot of obstacles that you can face in your products and so on. But I'd like you to think of the obstacles of your project as well. Yes. So when you think about building a data story, also think about the obstacles that you have doing the data project. And those obstacles might be, like this, that data isn't conveyed in an insightful and clear way. That could be a little bit down the line. But also that, for instance, the data collection is not there, or there is no ontology or organization in making sense or documenting. Well, where is this data from? What does it actually say? How did it came to be the way it is? Could be with access, could be with cleaning, transformation, with analysis itself. So also think about this. Okay, this is my tip for you, because then later on you can use this again as a spices to cook your data story, right? It just enhances the flavor of the story. Okay. Hope you guys are still with me, and we're gonna go ahead to the next point. Oh, sorry about that. Let me go back to the previous points. And moving on, I'm gonna go into the last part, which is I want to talk to you guys about how we structure the story. Sorry a little bit, because my computer is a little bit misbehaving. Okay, and we're back. So now that you thought about all of these things as, let's say, elements that you can utilize as your ingredients, now comes the recipe, right? How we order things, how we tell the story, how we put the events in place, so we kind of have a direction, have a place that we want to go, and we know how to get there. In the end of the day, that is what a story is all about, right? You have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have a path, something to get from A to B in a very, very interesting way. So here is one of the key learnings, and something that will help you tremendously when creating stories, is thinking about a line. That's it. A line has a direction. So instead of you like an arrow, perhaps is even like a better representation. Instead of you thinking of all of these things that happen, and then okay, and then you start here, and then you move over there, and then you go back, and then you move forward, and it's like, this is too confusing for people to listen to. So instead of you jumping straight into your Miro boards or your Google Slides or your dashboard or whatever it is that you build your stories, that you think about the events and how you're going to move from one to the next. Okay, so that's the key to great storytelling, really, is having a great storyline. And then the preparation of this, the outlining, is where you should spend a lot of time, even before, you know, building any kind of like design or like slides or frames or whatever it might be. So a very typical type of storyline is the linear storyline. It's very easy to do. It's not like rocket science or anything of the sort. Let's say you are an analyst or like you're a marketeer or something like that. And then like an important stakeholder, perhaps your boss, knocks on your door and says, I need you to segment our users. We need to understand what's going on. And then you start the project, say, okay, and I cannot find the data. I don't know where the data on our customers are. And then perhaps, you need to beg the data engineers to create some, some API ports that you can kind of link to download the data or something like that. And then you start by cleaning the data because you realize it's a mess, etc. Very linear. But that really works. You already kind of have the beginning of a story over there by just saying, okay, this is the beginning, this is where I was, etc., etc. You can play with this a little bit as well. Yeah, you can play with the order that you tell the story. So you can, my recommendation is that you build it linearly, right? You just think of the events happening chronologically as it happened in real life, right? We did this, but then this happened, then we did that, and then that thing happened. Okay, cool. You add these post-its as, names of your chapters, so to speak, right? So you do that to have a very clear outline of all the events. And later on, you can either tell it that way, or you can, shift things around a little bit. So another way you could tell the story is, again, starting with the end, is the bottom line up front, or the starting with the why. So we start with the conclusion, you give people the final numbers and say, okay, guys, we saved the company, 100,000 euros. Okay, and now we're going to tell you how we did it. So you draw attention. So that's another way you can tell the story, but you need the events in place first so you can reorder them. So I want you guys to write down some common or perhaps even uncommon steps that, we face on analytical projects. When I mention analytical projects, again, anything that needs some data and needs some exploration and needs some, deriving of insights, something like this. So think about the steps you usually go through when you perform something like this. So let me just put a timer here. Let's go with I think 3 minutes might be enough. 3 minutes. Awesome, guys. Yeah, was a great one because I already see a lot of things that we can use to build our outline. So I want to pick a few from here just to give you as an example. Of course, you can be more specific or you can tailor it to your own case. But I really like, I don't know who did this one, but this post-it right here already has a lot of steps, right? That are, you know, broad enough to apply to a lot of cases. So I'm going to use that. I broke down into a few different post-its, and I'm going to start bringing here to the story. So we might start with the defining the problem. Perhaps we think about the assumptions we have. We have the gathering of the data. Let me just pick this one, gathering data. I think someone mentioned about developing data collection instruments. So let's put that before gathering the data, right? So let me just make this a little bit smaller over here. What else? We have then would be, you know, a little bit, let's see if we have some things over here, the meeting with data analysts. Let's put that one, right? There will be the SME that will help us with the analysis. Then we're going to do the analysis. Let's say we do it over here. And then there was another one that I saw about, where was it? Interviewing people, clarifying, transcribing. There was one with sharing data with the stakeholders. So I would even say sharing the results with the stakeholders would be one, but I'll put this one over here. So we share it, then perhaps we have some learnings along the way. You could have other steps over here. Then maybe after this, you would do your A/B test or something like this. You design an experiment that you want to run. So then you add it also to the table and so on. So just by doing this right here, you can add as many elements as you want. And I would totally recommend that you do these kind of things in a platform like Miro. The reason I say that is that you can enhance this outline by adding other elements as well. So I've done this. We've done this with students, with you know, big organizations as well. They start adding here the information. So they might start adding screenshots of charts, you know, videos of things that they can find, embedding some elements over there. So you pretty much can break this down. You have it as a block, let's say the problem definition, and then you can link, you know, to minutes of meetings you guys have had, or any kind of like data or analysis that was done before that showcase this particular problem, and why is it important for you guys to go a little bit more in depth. Same when it comes to, you know, gathering the data. You can link to where is it, you can add the documentation of how you can find it, how you can access it, and so on and so forth. Lay it out, right? In this line, think about how you would go from one thing to the next. That's basically it. That's what this gives you. And if you do something like this, again, before you start touching any you know, medium for presentation, like your board or your slides and so on, you are way ahead. You're going to save yourself so much work and so much trouble, because then you know where you're going. You're not going to need to redo it over and over and over and over again. Okay. Hope this is clear for you guys. Keep adding questions to the question board as well. We're gonna get that later on. Okay. Now I'm gonna nod a little bit to it. In the Canvas, there is more of an explanation on this, okay, which I'm not gonna spend too much time. But the 3-act structure is a very kind of classic and effective way for us to structure stories in general, and it can work very well for, you know, any kind of design work, analytical work, and so on. So sometimes working linearly, it can work very, very well. In the Canvas, in the template that we're gonna you know, share with you, there is an example of this in use. You know, you can start by, again, you're just, you know, the analyst kind of sitting by your desk, chilling. You get your boss, you know, annoying you. We need to build a new dashboard, and you're like, I'm not gonna do it. Okay, we really need it. Okay, so I'll do it. And then, you know, all the steps that you need to kind of go all the way there to build it up. And then here you say, yeah, they're not going to use it. And then it's terrible. But then you make some key changes. You know, you go to the presentation, you slam it. Stakeholders love it. The CEO, you know, applauds it and everything. It's like big moment. And then everybody now starts using. So like that would be a way to utilize this sort of structure in telling data stories as well. For me, it kind of is like either or, okay? You can either use this or you can use this one. Both work very, very, very well, okay? Cool, so for the last part, the last thing I want to cover with you is really about the format. I've been kind of, you know, telling it quite a bit that you only should consider it a little bit later. But in fact, I'm a little bit like I'm cheating a little bit here because depending on your situation, you might be constrained. What I mean by the format really is what medium are you going to use to tell the story, right? It could be like me here doing a live presentation. You know, there's some great pros to this. There are some cons as well. But could be that in your organization, you need to tell the story via an email, right? And you need to kind of pack it up and make sure everything fits and it's there. Or sometimes like it needs to be like a written report, quite extensive, or, you know, might be other formats. So you should consider the strengths and weaknesses, the pros and cons of each format in order for you to make sure that you're, you know, enhancing the story and mitigating the problems that you're going to have with that particular medium. So I have this board that I want you to help me, actually. I want us to fill this out together. I added a few different types of formats you can use to tell data stories. So the classic one, right? The ones we're doing right now is a live presentation. When you have a presenter, perhaps probably you live on the spot, walking the audience through, right, what has happened, and usually with some sort of like you know, visual aids, like, you know, some tooling like this. Perhaps it is a dashboard where you're gonna add things over there, and then, you know, you need to order elements or something like this in order to tell stories. You could very much, especially nowadays, do pre-recorded presentations, right? You record what you have to say and then you share it, you know, around across the organization. Perhaps you need to write down a report, like perhaps a short one, perhaps a long one. But, you know, you need all the data there with the text, with the, you know, the story and the summary and the thread going from one place to the next. Or this one is rare, but, you know, also a possibility. You could do audio only, just telling the story without any kind of visual elements to it whatsoever. So I want you all to help me out with this. Just, you know, create new post-its and write down what you consider to be the pros and cons of each one of these types of formats, okay, these types of mediums. If you have any other tools or something that you'd like to share, that's also fine. Just add post-its here, just write it down for each one of these. I wrote a few there, some the stuff that I've seen on the wild, okay? So for this one, I'm gonna give everyone a little bit more time because there's quite a lot here. So let's say we do perhaps like 8 minutes for this one. I think should be enough. See how much time we have. Yeah, let's do 8. And then we go to final considerations. Yes, true.
For Molly, the music that you're hearing is actually in the product of Miro. So that's the timer. You can set a music and you can choose from a couple of tunes, about 6, 7. So that's what you hear.
I see that Mark is on a rampage against written reports. Interesting.
Don't see any activity anymore, Mauricio. I think we can
Yeah,
move.
I was thinking about it, so I'm gonna just stop the timer. Love what you guys have done over here. Wholeheartedly agree with your points. Why did we do this? Is because once you have the outline, once you have the story you want to tell, then, and you have selected the format, or it was selected for you in case you don't have a choice, consider the pros and cons in a way that you enhance the pros and mitigate the cons, right? So as one example, a live presentation is great that you have live Q&A, immediate feedback. So make it interactive like we are doing over here, because we have the possibility to do so, right? But then, of course, you know, we need to block time because it can go overboard, it can be too long, or we can a little bit go on a tangent. So we need to be careful about what the agenda actually is, right? So just as an example, but it makes it really, really powerful when you think about it on those terms, okay? So this is what I have for you today. I'm going to share with you, this is for us at Growth Tribe when we do this kind of events and this kind of talks. If you could, you know, spend perhaps a minute in here or maybe a little bit later on to just give us some feedback if you enjoyed the experience today on grow.ac/31st of May. So, you know, just copy paste, that should take a minute. And yeah, so perhaps you can even share on the chat. But other than that, I guess we can go to questions and answers. Yes?
Yes, for sure. So for the people that don't know where you can ask your questions, all the way down at the board, you can leave the questions for Mauricio, and I will be asking the questions in a bit. We already have one. Oh no, that actually was mine. Mauricio, for your question, while the others are typing their questions, what do you prefer? Do you prefer first telling the process or first the results, and how go about this with cultural differences? Yeah.
Good question. So when telling the story, usually I go like this. If I trust the audience that they have a vested interest in what I have to say, I'll go with process first. Because I like, you know, keeping the, let's say, the climax or the you know, the big reveal to the end and kind of build towards that. However, if I'm a little bit skeptical that they might not care too much, then I'll probably go, you know, results first, like as a big opener. It's like, you know, you enter with guns blazing, saying, this is why this is really important. Look at these big numbers over here. And then from there, you know, I kind of walk them through. So this is usually how I like to go. My personal preference is to go with process. But yeah.
All right, clear.
It's on audience.
For the people that are with us, please write down your questions here on the bottom of the screen, and now we'll be able to ask them to Mauricio. Yes, I see some people writing down, and I will bring everybody to me that's on the board so you can see where you can leave your questions. Do you make a story by yourself or as a team is the next question.
That's a good point. I like to build it by myself and then share with the team for review, for peer review, to get some feedback. I'm more on the fence that if you try to do it together, it creates that too many cooks in the kitchen kind of problem, where you start disagreeing from very basic things that might not matter that much, right? Like who the character should be, or should we tell it from the end user's perspective or from the developer's perspective? And you're kind of like, no, this is not really what is going to make or break the story. Yes, both, like it could be done both ways very, very well. So I'd rather do it myself and then share with the team and ask them, you know, is this working for you? What parts are confusing? What is not working for you?
Does that mean that you can also not ever have a perfect story because there's too many cooks?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I would reserve judgment. It might happen, but from my experience, it's usually good when there's a very clear leadership, even when you have more, you know, more people joining into the story. So if you think about, let's say, a lot of writers, right, writing for a series, if it gets to like too many people to pulverize, it starts losing focus and starts kind of not making a lot of sense, because then you don't really know where to go as a group. Everyone has a little bit their own take about what the story should be. But if you have a very strong leader, right, that can pull things together and have the power to really say, no, we're not going this way, it's this way, and get people to kind of commit to that, then I think can be very powerful. It's just harder.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for clarifying then. How do you integrate context with the process and results? Pre-reading, how do you bring them up to speed?
That's a great question. So, well, of course, it all depends on the audience, right? So you can do a little bit of audience analysis, so to speak, like think about who are the stakeholders, who the audience going to be, how engaged already and how knowledgeable they are about what's going on. So that's your first step. And then if you feel like they are like super on board, then I'll just go with the context like put together, right? So you can tell the story while like laying out the context because they are already very familiar with what's going on. However, if they're not, then I would go with like a pre-reading. That's one way. Or, and this is my preferred way, is you tell the story with the key points for context. You add the context as key points as anchors throughout, but you don't go super in depth. And then you give them a handover later where it goes in depth. So again, that's why like Miro is super powerful for this, because you can very much put it on the screen and say, look, there's a link here. Like, there's a document here. If you want to know more about this particular thing, after the session or after the presentation, you can click, you can go, you can explore, come back to me, ask questions.
Okay, great. Is there a strategic way how you can find out if your audience already the level of the knowledge that your audience has? Because in my own situations, a lot of times I have to present to decision makers and I assume that they have some knowledge, but I'm never sure. So I also don't want to educate them about something that they already know. Do you have a tip on how do you figure that out in a good way?
Yeah, a little bit like based on statistics, I would do like a bit of a random sample and interview. Like so let's say you're meeting like 30 people that are part of a single team. Perhaps I'll poll like 2 or 3 of them and say, can I have like 15 minutes with you, ask a few questions about something that's coming up. Of course, time for everyone is very valuable. So just, emphasize this is for you. I'm going to tailor this for you. So this can be beneficial. So, you might think, oh, we waste 15 minutes now, but then we don't waste an hour or 2 hours later on, right?
Yeah.
Very effective.
Okay.
So
thanks.
that's the way I usually go about
it. Next question: how do you balance detail versus high level when sharing results?
Great one. Layers. So again, it's like the handovers. You don't think about cramming everything into the one presentation on one report. That gets too heavy. So this is a little bit from academia, but really use references, use external links, things like this. Kind of give the audience the possibility to go deeper in case they need. The only exception to this is when the objective of the presentation is already very highly technical, your audience is highly technical, then you need to go deep, otherwise it's kind of like a moot point, right?
Yeah. I see. Cool. All right. And then the next one, of interesting question as well. How do you make sure that the story was good? Do you collect feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. Data is everything. So do collect feedback. You can also feel a little bit, especially if you get experience, right? Like telling a lot of stories, being in front of audiences, presenting, you get the feedback at the time. It's kind of like how comedians do. They are great at this because if you think about the specials that you see from your favorite comedians, that's the best material because throughout the tour, they are getting the feedback from the audience in terms of laugh, right? How hard do they laugh? How funny was this? And they start kind of, polishing it up or maybe removing some bits that don't work too much. So you get a little bit of that live feedback when you're presenting live, but also you can do some feedback collection, some interviews later on. So those are some ways you can definitely get that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Are there more questions? Because this is the time that you can ask Mauricio everything that you want to learn about data storytelling. I don't see anybody typing anything anymore. Yeah, so no, yes, we got one more question.
Got one more, okay.
There we are. How do you go about telling the story within a story of the results within the greater telling of the entire data story? Does that break up the flow at all?
So let me see if I got the question right. Telling the story within a story of the results. Yeah, I don't really know if I got the question correct, but if it is about like when you get to the results, then you start drilling down and like spending a lot of time over there, I'd say you get diminishing returns, right? It's kind of like usually the audience doesn't need for you to kind of express 10 times why did it matter and so on. Okay, so this is something you will find also on the Miroverse template.
Yeah.
One part that we did not discuss today, but it's very useful, is the use of analogies. So instead of you spending a lot of time and drilling down and telling stories inside the story, you can kind of do kind of like a side tour, go into an analogy to make sure that they understand very clearly, right? You bring the results closer to them, closer to their universe. You make the point over there and they have that, okay, I know what you're talking about. And then you come back to your story and that's it. Like you don't need to spend more time. Again, you can always say, okay, later on we can sync. If you want to go into the technical details, there are ways we can arrange that. But don't spend too much time doing it during the presentation. Otherwise, yeah, you risk boring or confusing people even more.
All right, cool. That's a clear answer. Is there a character in the story? Is there a villain? Yeah, so I think there is a character. That's what we talked about. But the question here is there also a villain? Should there be a villain, or could the character be a villain?
I would usually advise against it. Okay, about thinking on analytical projects as having a villain, because then you enter the world of like office politics, perhaps, and something that can backfire. What I mean by that is like don't be afraid of saying as it is when it comes to obstacles. Again, if you say, look, it was very challenging for us to convince the database administrators to grant us access, or to say, oh, like this part took longer because we need to go through all these loops and hoops to get, the regulators, to approve on what we were doing, either internal or external. That's perfectly fine. This is something that should be. But as soon as you paint it as something personal, then I'd say that's okay. No cool.
Yeah, that's a great advice. And I think the villain can be the obstacle, right? So there's definitely room for a villain, but not too personal.
Exactly. If you tackle it as a thinking of the process and the story, that's fine. Just don't make it personal. Again, it's usually part of their role, right? I understand it very well that if I ask for some data and the database admin said it's not for you, they probably have a reason, or they're just doing their job. It's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. All right. I don't see any more questions, so I will move over to the end slide of today. And what I did also here is I added the Mauricio's template. So if you want to see storytelling template, I also email it to you after this event, but you can find it here as well. You can then do your own workshop with your team alone, and then way more in depth. Also, you can find links to Growth Tribe, of course. And I think it's now time to thank Mauricio a lot for being with us today, and also for everybody that was here. So a lot of people from the US, so they woke up early, a lot of people from Europe that stayed after their work still with us to learn a bit more about data storytelling. I found it really interesting, Mauricio. Muito obrigado. I'm really happy that we have your template now here, and I'm really looking forward to see people starting using it. Just want to get back to the startup program. If you are a startup and you want to get those $1,000 in Miro credit, miro.com/startups, and we're happy to welcome you to our program. We have a startup community, and if you want to see the recordings of our events, also of this one, you will find them in our startup community. So you can join us there. Also, the link is on the Miro board here. And if you want to stay in touch with me, my LinkedIn, you can find also here on the board. So with this, thank you so much. I saw a lot of great reactions in the chat already. Thanking you, Mauricio. So
thanks, everyone.
Maybe, yeah, you have your LinkedIn somewhere. Maybe you can type it in the chat so people can find you.
Yeah, I'll type it down in the chat. It's actually quite easy. It's grow.ac/Mauricio. Easy peasy.
Cool.
You can connect with me over there. Yeah, always open to connect and hear from the community. Let's go.
All right, so I wish you a great of your day, and I would like to see you at our next event. So have a great day, and I will stop recording right now and close the room.